Patterns of ownership and control of the mass media and how media stereotypes are presented. Also called the magic bullet, the hypodermic syringe model states that media can have a direct and immediate effect on the audience. Howard Laswell in 1927 studied how this theory explains the mass spread of Nazi propaganda across Germany in the lead-up and during World War II, and the implications this had on the people of Germany. People passively accepted the wartime propaganda and developed a collective attitude, causing vastly negative implications for the Jewish social groups in Germany. The case study of the murder of James Bulger in 1994 also shows the HSM, in which two young boys kidnapped and murdered Bulger, apparently because they had watched the horror film Child's Play 3. However, there was no definitive evidence of this. The Sun newspaper ran a petition which attracted 280,000 signatures in favor of longer sentences for the boys. We can see here how the media had a great implication on the lives of the boys. However, there is criticism of the HSM model because it suggests that all audiences are entirely passive to the media, when in reality people have a lot more control over how much power the media has over them and their opinions. Neil Gregor stated that propaganda was not to deceive but to articulate that which the crowd already believed. This suggests that the Germans were willingly misled and were as much to blame as the media itself, therefore disproving the HSM. Katz and Lazarsfeld argued that social networks are dominated by opinion leaders, who influence others in the social network, suggesting that a person's social relationships have a more direct influence over the individual and social groups than the media does. Because of having to go through two stages shown on the screen there, audiences are not directly influenced by the media and are not passive in their acceptance of it, like with the HSM. This theory suggests lower implications on the individual and social groups than the HSM does. The two-step flow model recognizes that most people watch media as part of their social network, so therefore is more fitting to today's society than the HSM model. However, this model doesn't account for if an opinion leader has beliefs affected by negative sources or has been subjected to an imitative effect. As well as this, the media is still having a direct effect on the individual due to affecting the opinion leader. Also, there are also people who are socially isolated, so therefore will be directly influenced by the media and not by opinion leaders. To conclude, the media does in fact play a powerful role in the lives of individuals and the social groups they are part of today. The theory that best summarizes this implication is the postmodernist model. This argues that the media is an integral part of postmodern society, with individuals using media to construct their identities and to place themselves into social groups they feel part of. Postmodernists criticize theories such as the HSM, which sees society as passive and generic. They also don't believe there is one dominant meaning to media and its messages. The media is a constructed part of the individual's reality, so therefore the media doesn't have an effect on the audience. Publicly owned media, such as the BBC, is funded by license fees from the audience and isn't privately owned. The BBC doesn't need to use advertisements for revenue and doesn't need to be pressured by politicians or owners to promote a certain message. In some totalitarian countries or single-party states, the media is state-controlled and often restricts to only show certain information which promotes the laws of the state. Privately owned media, on the other hand, are outlets such as newspapers and television owned by private individuals. Ofcom regulates British television to make sure it is politically impartial, but newspapers aren't regulated by this, so can promote any political agenda. In 2011, George Lustis Levinson was appointed to chair a two-part inquiry into culture, practices and ethics of the British press. He published a report of Part 1 in 2012, creating the press regulation system we still use today. It stated to remove the Press Complaints Committee, which was funded by private owners. In 2014, the Independent Press Standards Organisation, IPSO, was created to replace the PPC. However, it was still very similar. The second part of the inquiry was in response to the News of the World phone hacking scandal from 2002 to 2011, and it looked into relationships between newspaper organisations, police, and politicians. Levinson's report included introducing Section 40 of the Crime and Courts Act 2013 in response to the scandal. This required all publishers outside of a press recognition panel organisation to pay all libel costs against them. However, this was never brought into law, and in 2018, Matt Hancock, the then Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, said that Section 40 would not be started and would be reappealed at the earliest opportunity. However, newspapers such as The Guardian in 2017 said it would discourage newspapers from conducting difficult investigations and holding powerful people to account. Section 40 caused a lot of controversies, and press regulation in England is a devolved area. Private ownership in the press causes a lot of problems with privacy and making sure there isn't bias, as shown by the Rupert Murdoch News of the World scandal. Who owns the press plays a large part in the content and the way that journalists go about writing stories. Owners of a private media organization can have a large control over the content they release, which has made sociologists question to what extent the media we consume is non-biased. In a modern age, we have access to more variety of media than ever before. However, a lot of these sources still lack diversity due to ownership, and this can affect the content produced for audiences. Sociologists have identified a number of reasons for the lack of diversity in mass media, the first being concentration. This refers to the process in which control of media is shared across an increasingly smaller number of companies or individuals. The concentration of ownership will negatively impact diversity because fewer corporations owning fewer media outlets means a lesser range of general opinions. Baldagan stated that in 1983, 50 corporations controlled most news media in the USA, compared to 7 in 2004, showing how the media has been concentrated. Doyle argued that the concentration of media limits democracy and can mean an abuse of power because it is easy to control public opinion with more content owned by the same person, so therefore it's more likely to have the same views. A very prominent stereotype in the media is regard to ethnicity. Sociologists argue that ethnic minorities are often underrepresented or stereotyped negatively in the media, and this often contributes to racist thinking. Akinti argues that television coverage of ethnic minorities overfocuses on crime, AIDS in Africa, and black children's underachievement in schools, but ignores the culture and history of Africa and its influence on British society. Tuan van Dijk analysed news articles over several decades across the globe and found that representations of black people in the news conform to a list of basic stereotypes. One of these is the association of ethnic minorities with moral panics. In Policing the Crisis, Stuart Hall describes the moral panic due to a black mugger in the 1970s after multiple newspapers ran multiple stories about muggings at the hands of black men. From this analysis, Hall saw that black men had been stereotyped as muggers so that the police could blame this as the cause of the economic problems at the time. This showed how the newspaper was able to inflict fear into the public about people when they had no legitimate reason to, other than they believed the stereotypes created. Another stereotype Van Dijk found was showing ethnic minorities as threatening. Tabloid newspapers in Britain are the main culprit for this, pushing the belief that immigrants and asylum seekers coming to England are doing so to exploit the British welfare system because they are lazy. Poole argued that Islam has always been demonized by the Western media as a threat. A recent example of this would be how the press spread Euroscepticism in the lead up to Brexit, and this was also mirrored in the dominance on social media. As the referendum vote became closer, anti-EU and pro-Brexit news stories dominated the front page of newspapers. Newspapers in Britain are predominantly read by the older generation, and 61% of over 65s voted for Brexit, showing how the negative stereotyping of ethnic minorities caused people to vote for Brexit. To conclude, the media affects all of society by dispensing information that allows us to understand the world. However, this can be altered through who owns the certain media channels due to what agenda they push. Regulation of the press, however, is a very difficult topic because the line between freedom of speech and impeachment of people's personal lives can be very thin. As well as this, diversity in viewpoints is still lacking in modern media due to stereotypes and further concentration of ownership. Thank you.